Welcome to Havilah's podcast. I'm your host, Havilah Cunnington, and I am thrilled that you're here because we are concluding this series with being in your 50s. What is it like to be in your 50s? What questions should you be asking? And for those of us that I'm very close to this little window of time, I want to know, what should I prepare for? And what are things that we should be thinking about? We're going to answer some questions. You guys sent in some questions that we're going to actually answer. And I could not do this alone. It's been a really cool series because what we did is we picked a staff member or part of our team that lives in that little decade of time so that we could actually have a conversation together. And what I think I didn't put together until this season was that we really have different ages of women working together on our team. And I really love that. I think it makes it diverse. It makes it unique. And I think it just has a nurturing experience because you don't have to all be the same age. And so I think that's what I've loved the most is all the different guests this month have been people that are sitting around our table every week, serving you and figuring out how to serve you best on our team. So I hope you've enjoyed that. Now we have a conversation for our 50s. And I know some of you are in your 60s and your 70s and you're like, what about us? I know, I get it. But we were trying to just make sure we hit some of those big decades where life changes and things really shift. And you know what? We might hit 60s and we might hit teenagers later. So if that's something you want to see, let us know. But this whole series is really about what those questions we need to ask, living our best decade, really. And then next month, we're jumping into a brand new series about intentional living. We are starting off a fresh year with a fresh series. I am so excited about it. We're going to hit the new year resolution and goals in a whole different way than you could maybe think of. We're not going to do vision boards and pictures and goals. We're actually going to hit it from a whole different angle that I think is going to surprise you and hopefully empower you to live that abundant life and that intentional life you're called to. So don't forget to subscribe. So without further ado, we're going to have a conversation with a friend of mine and one of our staff members. Paula is here and I'm thrilled. Paula, you've been on the podcast a while ago and it was really about being here. We had a conversation. So for those of you that are listening, you're going to recognize her voice. But for those of you that are brand new here, Paula's been on our team for over 2 years, right? Mm-hmm. 2.5 years. She is phenomenal. Her daughter is now a grown adult and she tutors our kids at times. She's a brilliant young woman, which tells you the kind of mothering that Paula has done. But also what I love about Paula is when we started doing this series, I genuinely didn't think, oh, Paula could do 50s because Paula is so young at heart and she's so vibrant. I even wondered if you were younger than me. Like I genuinely had that thought of like, maybe I'm putting her at my age and she's younger than I am. So Paula, thank you for being here.
So happy to be here.
I love you. And I'm glad that you are doing this. Yes. So for those that don't know you and don't know kind of like how you showed up here, ended up here in Redding, yes. Tell us a little bit about who you are and how you got here.
Okay. Well, that's an interesting start with showing up in Redding because it marked my 50th year. So we're talking about 50s.
All right.
And I had just gone through the empty nest stage of releasing my daughter. She moved to Philly and there was some grieving with that. Like It's a real big loss. But I was excited for her because she was following Jesus. And I'm like, I don't care what you do, just follow Jesus. Like that's all that matters. And so it was a joy, but a difficult season of transition of like, okay. And I just turned 50 and then the Lord started talking to me about moving and coming to Redding and going to BSSM, which was not on my radar at all.
No.
But I'm so glad that I listened and didn't disqualify myself and have my list of reasons why it's too late and I'm too old and it doesn't make, sense on paper to do this. So, but it was perfect. And it's kind of was the kickoff to what my 50s have kind of been so far.
Yeah.
So
a lot of courage, a lot of risk, a lot of new things. Did you live your 40s like that too? Or do you feel like the 50, that mark was a moment when you thought it's time?
When I was asked to do this, I'm like, okay, I don't feel, this is my thought process. I don't feel qualified to do this. And when you talked to Michelle about the pictures, I'm like, my metaphorical photo album doesn't look like it should for someone in their 50s. So I started to disqualify myself right away and be like, I can't do this. You know what I mean? But as I dug into it deeper, it was really kind of fun because I looked at all these things that were carrying shame because my 30s and 40s were just filled with sickness and divorce.
Yes.
And being a single mom. And so much of it was survival mode, that my 50s really are for me very different, because I feel like it's like transformation time.
And this is why I'm glad you're doing the podcast. This is why, Paula, because you just hit so many markers of huge critical moments that the majority of women in this room have dealt with, or listening to this know someone who's gone through a divorce, sickness, disappointment, being a single mom, and then showing up in your 50s. And what I love about it is that those years were dark years. They were hard years. We've talked about it together, but that you didn't let that define your 50s. And so I that's why I love you on the podcast, because I think it's important that we don't always present the picture that makes sense, because most of us don't have that. Even though it seems like we do at times, we just don't. And I would hate for women not to hear that, where it's like, yeah, you're just empty nesting 50, that's it. When a lot of people have gone through some of the biggest heartaches, and their life has played tricks on them, and they've had to restart multiple times. And so 50 was a restart for you.
Right.
And so how did you restart at 50? Because I know you had restarted in your 20s and you had restarted in your 40s. How'd you do that?
Well, the grace of God for one. Mm-hmm. And I'm so glad. I don't know how people, honestly, I know there are people that have tremendous stories that don't know the Lord, but my story, I don't know how I would have done it without the Lord, because he always has a vision. He always has hope. He always has future. So when you in those times cling to that, it really is that he's the one that has moved me forward. But then I feel like there's a choice in there, because I feel like we always have the choice of okay, well, I can just settle here, and this is okay. And I'm thankful for what I have. And some of it sounds kind of Christianese and good, yeah. But is it really the life that you're called to live? I know. And are you done with the things that God has, dreamed over your life and things like that? And I will say 50s have been exciting, but they're hard. I feel like every day is a choice. I'm the oldest one in the room a lot of times now, yes. But yet I feel like I'm the one that's just starting, and all the shoulds that you talk about, I should already know this, I should have already done this, but I am where I am. So I can make a choice each day and be I'm not going to hand over my future and just watch TV or just serve and settle. And I love serving, but I'm going to make the choice and not disqualify myself and let God
so
dream
much
through
there.
me.
Paula, number one, in your 50s, you often are the oldest person in the room. I'm beginning to face that. I'm beginning to go wow, this is interesting. Then you said it's a choice. And then you said you start to face, I should know this, but I haven't done it. So what do you tell yourself? Because I relate to this. I don't care how your picture looks in your 30s and 40s. Getting older is a thing. The world treats you differently. And then also I do feel like the world is changing to the point that we didn't have permission in our 20s that these young girls have. We didn't have permission. I'm in my late 40s now. I have a different permission, and I'm seeing the girls have that we didn't have. We are having to restart because of the decades that we're in. Right. But I'm curious, how do you find the courage to say, you know what, I'm going to go in the room and I'm probably going to feel uncomfortable. And if somebody asks me, where's your husband? I'm going to say, I'm not married. And, you have a daughter and okay, so what are you doing? And you moved to Reading, you've been here for 3 years. How do you navigate those, I think, anxiety-inducing questions of a 50-year-old that I could imagine?
Right. I would say shifting my mindset to, and I read this in it was a Yale study that they did, that how you view aging, if you view it negatively or positively, affects where you gain 7.5 years more than if you quit smoking or if you started exercising or whatever. So just how we look at aging and being older and being the oldest one in the room and things like that, if it's negative or if it's positive. So really just trying to look for, okay, wisdom's a superpower. I get to step into more wisdom as I age, and looking at that as an asset, right, and not as I'm going to let the younger generation just kind of take over and take myself out of the game. Yes. And so I just feel like a lot of it is mindset, and then also faith that God's not finished yet. In first year of BSSM, I took this writing class that Jen Miskov, I think that's her name, was doing. And it was a time where we were having a small group. And we just kind of had to see kind of what the Lord was stirring in us, for an idea about a book. And right away I heard, it's not over, Ziklag. So I went and looked up the story of David and Ziklag, but it was just so encouraging to me because David recovered all. And I think like that mindset of like whatever's been lost, whatever I haven't gained, whatever, I just gonna stick on the truth that God has more for me, and what I'm deficit in, it's okay. I can be authentic in that, but I can absolutely be my own example of overcoming and believing and stepping into like who I was created to be. And I heard another thing about the U curve of aging, and how you kind of hit at 45, 50, like the bottom of the U curve. And then at 50, you kind of start on this upward swing where it just gets better and better and better. And so I'm like, well, that's interesting. I feel like, instead of midlife crisis, it's like a midlife chrysalis. And I'm in this place where it's uncomfortable, but I really feel like more freedom and beauty and things are going to come out of my yes. I just have to keep saying yes, because I'm telling you, I do feel like every day I have a choice to take myself out of the game and have good reasons. And I think we all do. We have got the reasons stacked up, but really, what's the ultimate truth in this, and what God says about us and what he's placed in our hearts is the truth.
It's true. And Paula, that's brilliant. I think about any woman that is in that stage, and I think it's early 40s to 50s, 60s, 70s. I think that keep saying yes, I think it gets more and more powerful. And I think you're right. And I liked that you said, because I have good reason to not work this hard. I have an appropriate reason to say I'm out. I'm going to settle. I'm going to make sure that I can, have what I need. I think all that is real. I'm curious, what do you think are things that you've noticed in your 50s that other 50-year-olds are saying that aren't helpful? Because I was thinking about, when we were growing up, people used to lie about their age.
Right.
I hadn't even thought about that until recently. Someone asked me how old I was, and I said, I'm 46. I think I'm 46. That's what I mean. And they go, oh, is that the truth? And I thought, yeah, it's the truth. That's funny. But I realized at that moment, you're right. People weren't saying oh, you're 25 again. Oh, you're 25 again. Oh, you're 25 again.
Right.
So I'm curious, is there certain things people say that drive you crazy that are in their 50s? And are there certain things that you hear that you think that's not going to serve you even in their 40s, that you think, gosh, I wish they wouldn't say that, because they don't even know what hard is. They don't even know what aging is as they get older. I'm curious.
Yes. That's a good question. And I do think aging is very stepping into 50s. I do feel like my body and, everything's just starting to change. And I'm like, okay, am I going to focus on that? Is this going to be a topic of conversation? But my value in how I look as I'm getting older. And I even feel like sitting here today, I'm like, oh, like when you brought me on stage and I told the world that I had been divorced, that was like a breakthrough moment, but it was hard. But even today, sitting here in my 50s, because I'm like, no, I'm owning my 50s.
That's right.
And I don't want to, hide how old I am and things like that. But I think the temptation, and I think how we grew up in America, there's so much of an emphasis on outward beauty and things like that. And kind of really in my 50s being like, there's no way to escape the physical changes that are happening.
True?
Yeah.
It is so, like you said, I feel like in your 30s and your early 40s or whatever, you can it's a mental battle. But as you get older, your body is telling you the truth too. Like your body's telling on you. And so, I used to say I could be tired, but if I put my makeup on and got dressed, I didn't look tired. Now my body tells the truth. Like no matter how I feel, I could feel wide awake. But if I didn't get sleep or if I didn't feel good, I'm going to look like I didn't feel good. And I think about like what you're saying is, and I do want to take it back, because I do think that there was, even in my own heart early on, I had to fight for young women. And I think when you're a young woman and you're in ministry, I know you're a mom and you're working hard, and we're all working hard to have a voice as a young woman. Then when you get to a mature stage, you're like, oh, wait, like, but I don't want to be timed out yet. But yet I was saying, give the young girl a voice. And now that's not necessarily me. But I do agree. I think that there's this take back your age, take back your season. And the truth is, for those of you that aren't watching this on video, Paula looks like she's in her early 40s, like even late 30s. Like she looks beautiful and young and vibrant. But I do think when you know your prime and then you know what you are, you just have this reality that no one's going to know but you're going to know, like, oh, but I was this, I was this age or that. But I do think, like you're saying, that idea of I have to make a choice and I can't sit on the bench and I'm not done yet. And there is that part that it almost costs differently than it did when you were younger. I'm not done yet. the insecurity is now replaced with a insecurity of, am I still relevant versus am I old enough or mature enough? It's different.
Right. That
it's
is
totally
a
different.
trade-off.
So I'm curious for the women that are listening to this that feel like, gosh, Paula, I relate to you. Like, man, I am in my 50s and I'm listening to these girls, these 20s and 30s and 40s. And I'm going, wow, that's good for you. But I'm 50 now. And the picture is nothing like the photo album that I thought. What would you tell them what would you tell maybe your younger self or the person before you got to Bethel and before you did your 50 restart of like, I'm going to do this again. What would you have told yourself?
In those younger decades or seasons?
Even at 45.
Oh,
as you got prepared to change and you're going into your 50s, now you're in your 50s. Would you tell yourself?
That it's okay to feel really uncomfortable in that transition and not like the fear of not knowing what getting older looks like and where is my, relevance going to land and my purpose land and all of that. And just to say like, God is faithful. He's always going to lead us into like security and into new places, and he's going to be there and he's going to bring transformation when you can't figure out how all these loose ends of your life are going to make sense and how you're going to move forward. Like, I just wish I could say, he's got this, you've got this, like, you're not alone. I think that sometimes is you feel alone in that. And I even feel like with things like in a roadmap of this season, no one really gives you a roadmap on menopause and like different things that sound like, oh, you should just know how to do that. But it's a lot to navigate.
It is.
But that's why we need community. And I think I would tell my, just to say that there are things that you can put in place that are going to help. I mean, I'm doing counseling now for the first time in my life.
Come on.
I wish I would have prioritized that at 45, certain things like that, and kind of dropped more of the people pleasing. So I had more room to maybe become more of myself in my 30s and 40s. But, I'm here now. And at least I'm taking that opportunity now to heal more, to grow more, like to let go of weights that I didn't need to carry that I was carrying. So I don't know if that made sense.
100%. I mean, I think the reality, you are a single mom and you're raising a daughter and you're taking care of your needs and her needs. There's so much to that we dismiss that I think is real. You didn't have the luxury of going on an inner healing journey while making a living and raising a child and all the things that a lot of us women, but specifically when we're doing it solo, have to work. And I think people dismiss that reality. There's no harder working woman than a single mother. There isn't. I'm a mom and I feel like I work hard. I cannot imagine not being able to tap out and say, okay, you're on. And honestly, there are women that are listening to this that have husbands, but they're single momming it. It's just the truth. They are on their own on every level other than somebody just being in the house. But I love what you said. You have to be okay with being uncomfortable. And I think that's genius. And I think that's the secret to being young, is that when you're young, you don't think about where am I going to sleep and what am I going to eat? And you don't think about all those comforts. You think about showing up. You think about getting a ride to that place. And I think that's very true, that the pressure of comfort versus being uncomfortable and living in that space, I think is brilliant. I know we're almost out of time, but I want to ask one question that one of our guests has asked us. So let me ask you, in your 50s, and man, I just love you, Paula. I'm like one of your super fans. But how do you embrace new dreams, even in a later season in life? And how do you embrace the dream?
Okay, I think that's a great question.
Disappointing of a dream,
right? Right. And sometimes when you've had a lot of dash dreams, it's hard to step into a place of I'm willing to dream again, because you've had so many disappointments in there. So I think that's real, and I think grieving over the dash dreams is important, because you can't really move into the new dreams until you've really let that grieving process happen. And of course, bitterness is something that can't stay to move on. I feel like that's a huge part when there's been a lot of disappointment. But just even in general, I've had to take on a new mindset of I can be a beginner at everything. So I started an art class because Chris Valentin gave me a prophetic word, and I have no what do you call it? No,
artistic.
Yeah.
skill.
Like I've got no grid for it, but I'm like, I'm going to take an art class and, it's really uncomfortable and I have no idea what I'm doing, but I'm like, okay, I'm just going to take a risk in my 50s and try new things, so there's a lot of other things I'm just trying. And along the way, I think the prophetic is beautiful because I think a lot of times I know in my life, having, prophetic words over my life have really been powerful too, to dreaming again, because I might not see that about myself, but it gives this space for God to say how he sees me. And it starts a little bit of that conversation with him about, okay, well,
right.
That's you. How do I dream about this? How do I take the next steps? How do I steward this? So I think that's exciting. And even if you don't have someone giving you a prophetic word, that's why I love your prophetic personality so much, because it teaches us how to tune into the Lord and hear his voice, because he has so many dreams over our lives.
No, you're right.
And like, he's really this source of like, oh, I didn't think of that. And oh, I feel scared, but what should I do? And he's like this best friend that partners with us in dreaming again. And like, he gave us like a spiritual womb that does not age out. Like he can birth new things in us at all times. So I feel like it's exciting instead of, going into fear mode of like, this is too hard and I can't. So I just want to encourage,
it's brilliant.
People in a different stage of life.
That's right. Mm-hmm. Paula, you're dropping all these like truth bombs. I know you're just talking, but I'm like, oh my gosh, there's so much. And I love that idea that our spiritual body does not age, that our body does, but our spiritual womb, our like the things that God has. I love that. Yeah. And I think that it's time that we go after that, even in our generation and culture and all that. I want to say that to our 50-year-olds, because I think there's a lot of people that fantasized about empty nesting and retirement. And what you find even statistically is that if there isn't something they're living for, they age quickly. It's not what they thought. And then you have this tension of trying to get your family to be what you need them to be because you didn't become. And I just know there are a lot of women that are watching this that are even going into their 60s that I'm looking at you and going, I know you feel like, well, I didn't do this, or I should be braver here. And I'm like, everything you've done is risk. Move a city, do the things, start new jobs, start a ministry school, practice. I mean, you've taken risks. And I think that's why everybody around you doesn't think, oh, she's in her 50s. We think of you as way younger, because I think you have actually thought of yourself as young. You've allowed yourself to grow. But I do think one thing I think it's important is to have grace for people that are in different seasons, to understand the risk it takes. It's different for a 50-year-old to say, hey, I'm going to try that, or I'm going to do this, versus a 20-year-old. And to have empathy, to understand that when somebody who's immature in their life is taking a risk or doing something different or believing a prophetic word, there's actually more risk in that for them, and to have grace versus like, oh, it's fine, no big deal, to see each other, right?
I love that.
Give dignity to that.
Oh my goodness.
Man.
That's such a word that's been in the last couple of weeks, of the dignity in that. And I think, I love that you hit upon it. Yeah.
We're going to get there. Mm-hmm. We're going to get there. And we're just beginning, Paula. We're just
getting
started. Listen, 50s are going to be great.
Yes.
Listen, for those that are watching, I hope that you got encouraged. I know Paula just dropped a bunch of truth, and I really encourage you to listen to it again, because I know that she hit on some hope deferred makes the heart grow sick, the Bible says. And being able to grieve the hope deferred is really important to moving forward. And I think about all of us, it surprises me the times that aging does hit me, or the things that do happen. And it surprises me, and it sometimes can take me out and go, oh, and then I'm stuck thinking about what someone said or how I was treated or what was done, and realizing, wait, those are just limitations that the enemy wants to put on me, that I want to put on myself, that the world wants to put on me. And I don't have those limitations with the Spirit. And so I want you guys to, hopefully through this conversation, feel empowered to be uncomfortable, to take risks, to not be afraid if the picture doesn't look like you wanted it to look. But most importantly, to not hide your maturity, but to live in it, and to give other women courage to be who they are, whatever season they may be in. Guys, this has been a phenomenal podcast. Paula, thank you for being here, and for being courageous enough to be on here, because I relate to that on every level. And most importantly, I'm so glad you're here, whether you are just jumping in your 20s or you are at that mature diamond season of your 70s or 80s. We're just thrilled you're here, and there's space for all of you. And most importantly, have a great season. Merry Christmas. Happy New Year. I don't know where you are listening to this in this podcast, but if nothing else, we will see you next year on our brand new series on intentional living. And if you like this podcast, let us know, because we will do more of these types of podcasts if you enjoy it. That's it for now. Have a great day, and we'll catch you next time.